Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 46 of the Squad Room. I'm your host, Garrett Tesla. I'm an active duty patrol sergeant in Southern California. If this is your first time listening at episode 46, I encourage you to go back to the first 45 episodes to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. But the Squad Room is about optimizing, maintaining, developing, back to maintaining. That's probably the most important part of this episode, of this podcast, is maintaining health and fitness in law enforcement. So if you're a cop, if you're a first responder, hopefully there's something in these episodes that speak to you. I've got 12 years on, just about 12 years, not quite 12 years yet, I guess. But like I said, a patrol sergeant in Southern California. I have a special in-studio guest today, and we're actually out of the studio. And before I reintroduce that person, I want to remind everybody that if you want to support the show, go to you can get your free audiobook from Audible by going to audibletrial.com/The Squad Room and pick up a free 30-day subscription and a free audiobook as a result. I like audiobooks because once I'm done listening to all my podcasts out on patrol... That was weird. Fix that in post. Anyway, when I'm out on patrol and I'm done with all my podcasts, I listen to audiobooks to help kind of keep my mind growing. My recommendation this week, and I actually got to be fair and I don't even know if it's on audiobook or not right now, but The Way of the Peaceful Warrior, a book by Dan Millman, pretty popular book, and it's a book that has quite the audacious claim on the cover, which says, a book that changes lives. Well, I don't know about that, but it's a good book. And if it's not on Audible, then at least it's out in hard paperback. Anyway, my guest today is a guest who's been on the show before. I wouldn't even call a guest, but maybe even a former co-host or a former contributor. But back from some adventures for a little bit. Traver Boehm, welcome back.
Thank you so much.
It's awesome to have you. It's awesome to have you here. We are out of the professional recording studio because when you got here, you noticed that the house is in complete disarray, and by that I mean we're doing some home renovations, construction. So the professional studio / gym is now the contract foreman's workspace.
That's right. /kitchen.
/kitchen, and we're sitting in our kitchen now, which has no flooring. And everything is removed, so it's super echoey. So I apologize to any audiophiles out there who are bummed by the sound, but it's driving me insane. But I'm kind of a sound geek, so I pay attention to those things. Maybe other people wouldn't even notice if I hadn't said anything, but I can hear that echo like I'm screaming into the Grand Canyon. I'll have to deal with it for the next hour of time. All right, so enough about me, though. If, like I said before, if you're just picking up the episodes and you don't know who Traver is, go back to episodes 1 and 2 especially, where you'll learn not only about me, but you'll learn Traver's involvement with the show and his history and those sorts of things. And then we've been doing this, but I've been doing this about a year, almost 2 years, year and a half, I guess. Year and a half. And a little bit ago, almost a year ago now, to be specific, you went off on a little adventure. And I'm trying to scroll through the episode where we last had you on, but
it's maybe January of this year.
Yeah, 23, episode 23. Okay. So a good way to play catch up for somebody is to listen to episode 23, where we talk about the Year to Live project. Yep. And what caused all that, or what provoked that, maybe is the right way to say it. So I don't want to get into the entire backstory of it because we have a whole hour, 15 minutes devoted to that in episode 23. But the short version is you went through some gnarly ass shit about about 2 years ago now, and you spent some time thinking on it and thinking about how to approach it. And then roughly a year ago, you decided to pursue this project, the Year to Live project. What is the Reader's Digest version of that for people who haven't or who are too lazy to listen to episode 23?
Sure. Reader's Digest version of we'll leave my backstory out. Let's just say, woke up one day and everything was different. So did some contemplating and decided to use all of 2016 as a personal / social experiment and live the year as if it were my last. And that involved a lot of travel, all kinds of adventure, volunteering, putting myself in some really uncomfortable situations over and over and over again, and really diving into that question and embodying it. Not just taking it as maybe if it's easy, I'll pretend like it's my last year, but going, oh wow, this gives me permission to do stuff that I never would have done before. and gives me a drive to do stuff that's far harder and more challenging than I ever would have done before.
So I think a lot of the this was not intentional, but I think that the theme, if there is such a thing for this, is like thinking about it on the fact that you're on your way over here. I'm thinking about this. I think the theme of this episode, would probably be 2 episodes, honestly, is transitions. And you've gone through a bunch of those, and then within the year, you've sort of condensed an entire lifetime almost of experiences, unique experiences, into the last year. And I wanted to kind of go through some of those things and learn about kind of your mindset going in and out, but also what some of the things you've learned from it, because you've had quite the year. And I mean, you're here for a week or so, and then you're on to another adventure after this,
Right.
And on top of that, you're maintaining your physicality.
Yep.
And all this. I mean, in between all these things, you're living out of your truck, yes?
Or
couch surfing?
Yeah, I'm couch surfing. I'm Airbnb-ing.
Okay.
Staying with friends, finding people on the road who'll take me in. Yeah, it's a challenge to stay in shape, but if you on that subject, but also it's a pleasure to. I have a kettlebell on the back of my truck and have done numerous workouts on hotel room floors of, okay, let's just knock out 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, 100 kettlebell swings. Pull over. I've been driving for 5 hours. I'm going to lose my mind. Asterisk, I love Audible. I have like no tie to them, but I've probably gone through 40 audiobooks this year. So,
well, that's funny you mention that, because if other people want to try Audible, they can go to audibletrial.com/the squad room and get a free 30-day trial.
And that was unscripted.
Beautifully
totally done. But yeah, I listened to a ton of audiobooks, but I've also just pulled over and found a park and gone, man, I'm so sick of driving. I'm going to knock out, 400 reps and then hop back in the car. So it's totally doable.
Yeah. You were... What is it about? I mean, this is way off the topic of what I want to talk about today, but I mean, we go to like this is something I've been thinking about, and something that has been on the top of my mind is I've had a hard time with the fitness and the fitnessing and all that sort of stuff over the last 6 months or so, 8 months. Really a struggle, and part of the entire reason I started this podcast all the way 46 episodes ago was trying to figure out the things that people did or do, or what caused them growing up to be the kind of person who prioritizes that.
Yeah.
And also, or is just naturally inclined that way.
Right.
And, we had like Aaron Lohman, who's a New York PD officer, on his Instagram handle is Huge Fat Loser. So big dude, 10 years on, typical scenario, got on the job after the academy, the night shifts, rotations, kids, all that got to him, and he's just, he ballooned up. He's way overweight. So now he's on a mission, and he's dropped like 100 pounds or something like that in the last year or so.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, he talked about growing up in a family that was, food-based and food-centric. And so he had to make a shift in his mindset to do this. Other people like, John Wellborn, who was a guest in the last episode, who grew up in sports and activities, and so that was ingrained early on.
Yeah.
I know you played water polo.
Yeah.
But I mean, was it just that, or what? I mean, were your parents taskmasters when it came to physical fitness?
Yes and no. I was in sports from day one. I swam my whole life before water polo. Did judo. Played soccer, taekwondo. But also was the type of kid that would come home from swim practice and sit there and do sit-ups in my room as like a 12-year-old.
Is that because you just watched Karate Kid over and over? I mean, what?
Kind of, yeah.
Bruce Lee. I mean, was there
Bruce
something
Lee,
there that really sparked your interest, or you thought I want to be that guy? Was there a leader like that?
Definitely. It sounds so hokey, but Bruce Lee was a huge influence.
Yeah.
And watching the training, like him just training and reading his books. So it's like all I do all day is run, lift weights, and train. And somehow that integrated itself. Already having a sports background where my main means of expression was physical. That's how I expressed myself. You put me in front of a piece of paper and a crayon and I'm a disaster. But you give me, like, go run around, like, oh yeah, I can do that. Go do push-ups, yeah, I can do that. Go climb that tree, I can go do that. So there's, I think there's inherent ways of expression. You take a kid that's really artistic and they suck at PE class, they get picked on. but they can draw like a mofo. So there's something innate inside of people to go one way or the other, and accepting that this is going to be your strength. You know, how many people do you know that are bloggers or writers or want to be and go, I just can't write. Writing's not my thing. Now imagine if writing was fitness, or if you got physical results and health from writing. Mm-hmm. How many people would be in the same boat you've been in the last 8 months because writing is just not their thing. But we take fitness, and it's a one path to one result idea. Like the only way to get in shape is through fitness or through movement or through something. There's so many people that if they could write, because when they wake up in the morning, they journal, then they get on the computer and they write, and that's their thing. It may not be everybody's thing to move. It may not be everybody's thing to be involved in fitness.
Yeah.
But if they can find a way or a means that they enjoy or do not hate, like let's start there, as opposed to looking for the home run, like look at I'm willing to get up to bat. Mm-hmm. Is it dance? Is it surfing? Is it jiu-jitsu? Is it weightlifting?
Yeah.
Is it CrossFit? Is it yoga? Some kind of movement.
It seems to me that, and I'm learning this quickly now, I think, because of this. So maybe this is part of the purpose of the struggles that I'm dealing with over the last 6-8 months. And I think that the book that I just mentioned, Way of the Peaceful Warrior, kind of teased some of this out of me. Is like, and this was a point made on the Jocko podcast too, was that, motivation is not going to get you anywhere. Mm-mm. And it's going to ebb and flow like crazy.
Right.
So you need to rely on discipline. And there becomes the second prong of that challenge of well, if motivation does ebb and flow, how can you instill discipline to negate that flux like that?
Yeah, it's a tough question because, again, if we go back to something other than fitness, like society and all of us, especially men, we look and law enforcement, we look at fitness in a certain way. Everybody should move. Everybody should be in shape. Everybody should do this. It gets you positive results, which we can empirically measure, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But if we flipped it to something else that 80% of the world wasn't good at and struggled at and went through the same challenges that you do for motivation. Again, if we go back to writing, it's that everybody has to write. Your heart rate will go down. Your white blood cell count will go up. How many people would still not do it because they just, and disciplined, they're disciplined people. They're actualized people. They're goal-motivated people, but it's just not their thing. Mm-hmm. So I think if you're constantly swimming upstream, you're never going to get as far as someone who's swimming the other way. So if I love to move, I can't sit still. It's since I was a kid, it was like I just can sit still. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to out fitness everybody who can sit still, but they're going to outwrite me. They're going to outcreate me. They're going to outparent me if that's not my thing. Mm-hmm. So discipline has to bump up against truth and reality of you may just have to say, this is going to be an uphill battle, but I choose to do it because I want the results.
Right.
Just like someone who goes, you know what, I meditate for 10 minutes every day. I hate it. I'm miserable. It's the worst part of my day, but I have to check that box, and if I check 30 of them, I get to have a donut, and I have all these little tricks of ways I make myself do it, as opposed to someone who's like, man, I love this. I can't get enough of it. I do 4 hours a day. I've changed my whole life so that there's room for it. I'm willing to live in a small house and drive a shitty car so that I can meditate 4 hours a day.
Right.
You're not going to beat that guy, right? And he's probably just honest with himself about fitness and going, yeah, it's not my thing. Sure, I'll go to Spectrum and find someone to yell at me for a half hour 3 times a week, right? So it's accepting that maybe it's just not, and I'm not saying this for you, but maybe it's not everybody's thing.
Oh, that's fair.
You know,
I guess my struggle is it is my thing.
Yeah,
I like it. I mean, I like it. I find solace in going and exercising, or not even. I don't want to use the word exercising. In training.
Yeah.
You know, if I could spend 3 hours at the gym, I would.
Yeah.
And I don't. To me, I don't think that's probably actually my specific issue. It's probably more the decisions I make outside of the gym. Or the things that happen outside the gym that affect me being able to get to the gym. But
yeah, absolutely. Look, you've got a gym we're sitting in a gym project.
Yeah.
You know, like you just ripped your house apart.
Yeah.
How much extra energy at the end of the day? You've got a wife and kids. You've got law enforcement officers underneath you. You've got a world-class podcast.
Thank you.
That's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah.
You know, so if everything costs you energetic cash, you know, you're running out of cash some days. And where does that? You're not going to be like, well, I'm not going to parent today. You know, like, sorry guys.
Yeah, that's not a choice.
Make yourselves dinner and don't kill each other.
I think that's a spot that's often missed. I think, or a point is that I can't not parent. I can't not be a husband. I can't not be show up for work and be a cop. So there are
try that
some
for a
things
day. Just call in and be like, hey, I'm really gonna have a good workout today, but not coming in. Like, tell your wife, nah, you got the kids.
Yeah,
it's 1 rep max day.
Those are always good days.
See how that goes.
Right now, my 1 rep max is putting in a hollow core or a solid core MDF paneled doors inside the house, which are heavy.
Yeah,
doing that by myself. You were in here last week. I got so scratched up on my arms, I looked like a suicidal subject because I just scratches all the way up and down.
Good times.
Good times. Anyway, okay, so that's way off track.
It's all right.
But so you started the year. Well, the beginning of the year, you started your hospice training, and you spent 3 months there.
Yeah, I was in Santa Fe for 3 months working in hospice.
So, cops, the people who listen to the show, first responders, firemen, and medics, of course, too. We're surrounded by death on a frequent basis. So I enjoyed, and I'll put your blog where you wrote a lot about this. We'll put those in the show notes, but it's traverboehm.com. But it was interesting seeing your perspective on death. And so I wanted to ask, had you ever been that intimately close to death and illness at any point ever in your life?
Never.
Yeah.
It was so foreign. I don't have, my grandparents aren't alive, but other than that, I haven't dealt with major death in my life or major illness or been around it. I've never seen a dead body except for once at a funeral, and when I was 15, and it's just not my forte. So
what was it about choosing to work in hospice for 3 months that you thought you're just going to break all the mics? That's all right.
Sorry.
No.
Edit that out.
Right as we get heavy, you drop the mic. What is it about that time in working in hospice that you thought that was something you need to do as part of this project?
It's such a hard question to answer, Garrett. And it sounds so fluffy, but I meditated, and it hit me.
That does sound fluffy.
Yeah, like I literally sat there and was like, what would I do? And I wanted to take this question away from what would I do as far as like, oh, I'd go to Thailand and kickbox again, or oh, I'd go see the Eiffel Tower. What activities would I need to put myself through to change myself at the deepest level, so that if I took the question seriously on the very last day of my life, I would take that last breath in peace and full, going, okay, I've done everything I need to do. And the very first thing that popped into my head when I sat quietly for about an hour was, you're going to work with people who are dying. And I don't know why. It changed how I view the entire human experience, though. So I think it was probably the most valuable thing I did all year, the least extreme as far as like out there-ness. Yeah. But just a incredible experience of every day sitting with people who are dying. I have a guy that's still, one of my patients is still alive. I left him 2 days ago and spent the last 7 months, whenever I was within 12 hours of New Mexico, I'd drive back and specifically live there just to hang out with him, a guy in his 70s. To people that I met them on Thursday, spent 20 minutes with them on Thursday, and they were dead first thing Friday morning. So the entire spectrum of, being with people for the last months of their life, as opposed to, I think what you guys deal with is you show up and they are dead, or show up and they're very close to death. Being part of the dying experience was invaluable. Invaluable.
No, yeah.
Just unbelievable.
See, that's where I enjoyed reading about it, because I connected with that a lot, and the value out of it. And I agree, as of any of the things that I've learned in my time is that connection to death, and that association with it, or that relationship with it. I mean, I really think it's kind of a relationship.
Definitely.
And you're either estranged from it,
yes,
and you're not acknowledging it,
which 99.9% of the population,
and that was
myself included,
and me as well, until I had to, by law, address it or deal with it face to face. And then over the course of my career have developed, I wouldn't say a great relationship or a good relationship, but an understanding or a relationship with death. And that may not make sense to everybody, but I'm pretty sure any cop who's working or who's listening to this knows what I mean. You at least understand its presence. Yeah. And its very realness, which sounds silly because of course death is real, but why would you think it was maybe something that the whole concept is if you had a year to live, let's start by seeing what it's like to die? I mean, maybe not that consciousness or that cognizant of a thought, but maybe it's...
In some regard, I think if I swallowed the question deep, it had death in it, because I was viewing it as a means to understand life. And I was about to turn 40 when everything happened. So I thought, okay, this is the second half of my life. Let's put an end on this first 40 years and kill it. My marriage is dead. My business is dead. Let's look at physical death and experience physical death. So that January 1st of the next year, it is like a rebirth. And I don't think I knew this at the time. There was something else going on. But I had to experience it other than just reading about it, hearing about it, or knowing that it existed. And I think in hindsight, the benefit was finding how the lack of understanding of it and the use of the dissociation with the relationship, how that colors everyday life. How so many of us are afraid of death, and we have no idea. It's not even a concept. It's like if you sat with a hypnotist and then an hour later, like, holy shit, I'm scared of death. But I thought I was just scared of moving to Chicago. It's not the moving to Chicago. It's literally that. It's so far out there, or what keeps people stuck in their patterns, or what keeps people stuck in relationships or in shitty jobs. It gets down that deep that we are afraid of this final hour. And by spending time with it, and God, it's such a broad topic, but being with the spectrum of people from someone who is begging for death, and literally every time I'd go see him, I was like, oh, damn it, I'm alive again, to someone who is so terrified of their impending death that they can't even talk about anything other than video games and race cars, and every time I'd bring it up, there would just be this sheer terror on the man's face, so we stopped bringing it up. But experiencing that spectrum and going, okay, it's going to be different for all of us, so why don't we start to prepare and have a relationship with it and start thinking about it and playing with it. It's coming, so how do you then prepare yourself? How do you get to that point so that, so I took the idea of the full breath from Scott Mann, who I think you've had on, who said, I've held dying men in my arms, and you can tell the difference of men who have closed the loops of their lives and have lived the life they want, and they take that last breath full. And I've held men who are not, and there's unfinished business, and they breathe out in a different way at the end. And I think if people actually stopped and thought about that what is important in my life is not my carpeting and my external life, but how am I relating to my internal life? Because on that last day, that's all you're going to have. Because when I walked into that senior center or whatever nursing home, you've got ex-generals, you've got ex-millionaires, you've got homeless people, and guess what? You're all in the same shithouse. You're all in hell. So what your relationship to yourself is going to be the deciding factor of how those last weeks and months go. And if you haven't looked at it till you get there, I think you're kind of in trouble. And the people that had were at peace.
Yeah. So what's your relationship now to both that idea of death, but also now, conversely, your perspective on life? How did that change as a result of that?
Good question. My perspective on death went from having no knowledge of it and not even acknowledging the fear of it to looking at it as nothing to be afraid of, absolutely nothing, to a welcoming. It's just like, it's a transition. It's from point A to point B. It's no different than getting in your car to drive to work in the morning. And you're going to have a number of deaths throughout your life anyway. So, career change is a death. Divorce is a death. Going from womb to adolescence, I view as a death and a rebirth, right? It's a different life. The way this really hit was I had a patient named Richard, who I've written about, a guy who's 93, World War II, was at Normandy, and he wanted to die every time I saw him. So when I first got there in February or March and met this man, he's telling me, like, I think God's upset with me. He won't take me. My wife died 4 years ago. My brothers died. I live in pain. I don't sleep. I'm in this shithole nursing home. I have to buzz a button for someone to help me go to the bathroom. I hate it here. I want to die. And I walked in and was like, oh my God, I have no idea how do you respond to that?
Right.
Yesterday I was a CrossFit coach. Today, these are the questions I'm trying to answer. And would just sit with them and talk with them about it and do my best. And then I left for Guatemala. And in that time, he'd gone to the hospital a couple times and had some physical problems. And I came back and drove in, and he was the first person I saw. And I walk into his room, and he looks like shit. He's definitely gone. He went from 93, where I was like, oh man, you probably got like 5 years left, to 93, okay, you look 93. And I walked right up to him, sat down, and said, Richard, how are you doing? He's like, oh, I don't feel that good. And I put my hand on his shoulder and said, you know what, man? I think you only got about 3 months left. You made it. You did it. It's coming. Death is coming. You're going to die soon. And his face lit up. And he went, you think so? You think I only got a couple months left? And that experience, I just got goosebumps. That experience of going, 3 months prior, like, oh, fuck, I am wide-eyed. How do I handle this question? To, from the very core of my stomach, saying, congratulations, you're going to die. And having him from the very core of his stomach say, oh, awesome, I can't wait, shifted my thought on death forever. That it's not the death that we should fear. It's the not living. Because every one of those guys in that nursing home, they're going to die. You and I are going to die. But what they'd done up till that point was the deciding factor of, are you living with regret? Are you screaming mad and angry because you couldn't forgive someone and you brought them in here with you? Did you not do what you wanted to do because you were afraid, and now it's, guess what? You're 78. It's too fucking late. Or did you get after it? Did you forgive? Did you love? Did you have a family? Did you get after whatever it was you wanted to do? Did you release people that needed to be let go of? Did you embrace people that needed to be embraced? Like, how did you live your life is so much more significant than, am I going to do something that, yes, everybody's going to do? You're all going to die. So it shifted me away from, God, I'm worried about this thing that's going to happen anyway, to let's now deal with what I actually have control over, which is this amazing, amazing gift called life and the next, hopefully, 40, 45 years. Mm-hmm. It's yeah. If that makes sense.
No, it totally does. It makes me think of, who Andy Stumpf is?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So he's, for people who don't know, he's a former SEAL. He's a, what do you call it, wingsuit jumper? Mm-hmm. He's like a base jumper, mm-hmm. wingsuit jumper. He posts all these crazy videos of him jumping off perfectly good mountains mm-hmm. and like flying in his squirrel suit or whatever. And I'm gonna probably chunk it up, but he said something to the effect of, which I thought was a unique twist on it, was like, you've only got one death, so make it spectacular.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shift.
Yeah.
Right? A different way of viewing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus you've got a lifetime of life.
Right.
And we try it. We often focus on that. But,
right.
It's funny. I'm reading this other book right now that I have in front of me, Gratitude. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's mm-hmm. Oliver Sacks, who I'm not really super familiar with his work, but I know about him. He's a neurobiologist, neurosurgeon, mm-hmm. I guess, neurosurgeon, neurobiologist in New York. He's written a couple books. Awakening was made into a movie that he wrote. Anyway, this is a book of 4 of his essays right before he died.
Oh wow!
And he talks very openly about his death and that he feels it's imminent. And some days he's good, and other days he's bad. And it's this interesting take on someone reflecting on their own death.
Yeah,
it's a good book, Gratitude by Oliver Sacks. But you see that, I think, in especially the elderly, they've got a better relationship with it.
Yeah, it's around them everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
They live in it. Being in a nursing home is really hard. And you'd walk into a room and go, "Oh, what happened to your roommate yesterday? He's gone, and his shit's moved out the next morning, and he died." Then there's a new guy in there. Like, "Hey, this is John. Oh, hey, John." And then 2 weeks later, John's gone, and John's stuff's gone. Like, "What happened to John?" "Oh, he died last night." So this guy's just living, with a sheet slid between him and a bunch of people that have passed.
Yeah,
that's their everyday reality.
Yeah,
or just the misery of being in that environment.
Yeah,
I think they do have a different relationship.
It's funny, like, and I think about it too in the kind of perspective of my experiences with it, and elderly death or illness death is such a natural part of my everyday work. We're also a coroner's detectives. I mean, in my department, we function as both, obviously, deputy sheriffs, but also coroner's detectives. So in many agencies, a death happens, the police agency for that area calls out the medical examiner, which is an entirely different government agency that comes out and does the investigation of what caused the death, how the death happened, and then the autopsies and everything that come out after that.
Okay.
You'll often see that in most places. The medical examiner's office is totally separate. We are one and the same.
Oh, wow.
In our department. So what that means is any death investigation any death that happens in the county, my department has to go out and respond to.
Okay.
Even if it's in someone else's jurisdiction, because it'd be the equivalent of my neighboring municipal police department investigating a death and calling out the coroner's bureau. Well, that's us.
Right.
So we go out. So this they failed to mention this, by the way, in the flyer. In the job app before the academy. And I was literally on one of my first ride-along, first days of training, because they don't teach this in the academy because, again, most agencies don't do this. They aren't coroner's detectives. So they don't mention this in the academy, and they don't bring these things up because I went to an academy for a different agency.
Yeah.
And so I'm literally on one of my first days of training, and we get a coroner's detective call. And I'm like... excuse me, what?
Yeah.
Like, we're going to go do what now? We're going to go investigate a dead body. And it was a natural, I think if I remember correctly, it was a natural elderly death, but it was one of those things like, now I'm standing in this person's living room,
right?
Who, obviously imposing upon them in this most traumatic of experiences for this family.
Right.
And now I'm this brand new guy about a week out of the academy going, I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Right.
And being used to that. I don't think you'll ever be really used to it, but but point being is that I'm around every kind of death that there is at this point. Like I've seen I've seen every possible kind of death.
Yeah.
And more than once, multiple times in many cases. And the elderly always, those don't bother me, of course.
Yeah.
It's not surprising that, children are hard.
Yeah, of course.
To deal with. But it's interesting being kind of looking at these events. That's the hardest part of this job, my job, hands down, hardest part of my job is doing death notifications.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Right. And it's the part of the job that just sucks. There's no positive that comes out of it other than if you're really good at it on a particular day, maybe you can provide some solace or some support. Right. But that's really not our role either. We're this kind of cold, stilted.
Yeah.
So, but because of all these interactions with all these different types of death, I mean, suicide, homicide, SIDS, elderly, terminal illness. Then you talk about the people who were scared to die, the people who were happy to die. I've seen all those too, and watching. Maybe sometimes even watching the person experiencing the death themselves, but also the family and how then the family is dealing with that loss. It's always something that's fascinated me, and it's probably as much as I did not like the idea of being a coroner's detective. Once I found out I had to be a coroner's detective, I probably learned more from those types of calls than anything else I deal with.
I bet.
Because it is that personal relationship to it that you develop as a result of someone. I don't know what it's like to be punched by my drunk husband, right? And experience the black eye of a domestic violence victim. But death is one of those things that I now have a relationship with because of that experience. Right. And it's matured me in better than anything else I think the job has done.
I think that's the best way to look at it. It's matured you.
Yeah.
It changes your relationship with everything else you do.
Absolutely.
You know, it's such an integral. It is the birth and death. That's the only two guarantees in the human experience.
Yeah, it drives some of my family members nuts sometimes when I shrug off seemingly important things, or I just don't focus on minutia sometimes, because I am oftentimes in my own head thinking, I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's a huge piece of it.
Yeah.
I think everybody should volunteer in hospice.
I think it's a great idea.
A couple things this year that I've thought, you know what, this should be required of human beings, and it would change, you know, all the shit that's flying around the internet right now and who everybody's upset with and how worked up we all are. That would go from 100 to about 10 if people had to volunteer with people who are dying and do a couple other things.
Yeah.
But that is a major piece of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so you left hospice.
Yeah.
And then you did something that just blows my mind.
Yeah.
You went to Guatemala. That's not the part that blows my mind. That sounds fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so beautiful there.
So what did you do, though, once you got to Guatemala?
So I specifically went to do something called a dark retreat, which is a period of time of isolation in complete darkness.
Now, you also, you have a TED Talk on this, too, that you did after this. But when you say a dark retreat, let's whittle that down for people to clarify, because I don't mean like you go sit in a room for 3 or 4 hours in the darkness and you calm yourself.
Right.
Explain what you're dealing with there.
So I was in for 28 days, which I'll get back to in a minute. But basically, I'm alone in a 12 by 12 dome. It's concrete flooring, concrete walls. There is, a little bit of ventilation, no furniture, a toilet, a shower, and a foam mattress for a bed. And it is complete pitch blackness, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the entire time.
For 28 days.
For 28 days. And just the asterisk by that is I didn't know that they don't let people go more than 3 days on their first try until after I came out. Yeah, so I was talking with the people that ran the ashram, and they were like, yeah, we don't usually let people go more than 3 days, but we met you and kind of got a good feel for you and thought you'd be okay. And
somebody's got to go first.
Yeah, someone's got to go. And even the night before, like half an hour before I'm walking into this experience, I'm having dinner with the owners of the facility and some of the people that work there, and the owners who live in Guatemala all the time. They lived in ashrams their whole lives. They have spiritual names. They don't have their real names. They're like the starting lineup varsity. They're like, yeah, we've only done 14 days because that was all we could handle. I was like, what the hell are you guys talking about? I'm a CrossFit coach, and I went.
So these are people who've devoted their lives to this idea of dark retreat
and a different way of living, off grid. Meditations all day long. This is their entire life. They're devotees.
Right. A population that this audience probably doesn't connect with very easily.
No.
And they had only done 14 days.
Yeah. Multiple times. But that's the longest they've done.
But, okay, so they got a good vibe off of you? I mean, they probably actually did get a vibe. I mean, feeling your energy.
That's literally what she said.
She was like, he's got this, he can do it?
Yeah. I asked afterwards, I actually wanted to know what the feeling she got that would let her know I'd be okay, because it was such a, I came out of this experience and would talk to other people at the ashram who, I don't know how to even explain this, Garrett. Like, you have people that are weird. So you've got people that talk to angels. You've got people that see visions in their meditations, and then they draw these visions, or they draw these sacred geometrical shapes on paper that, like, where did that come from? Like, oh, I saw that in a meditation last night. Like, I don't see shit when I meditate. Like, I sit there and try to not count the time or think about surfing and breasts. It's like, fuck, you talk to God on the regular. And then they'd be like, yeah, I could never do the dark retreat. I could never even do a day in there. And so I was like, how the hell could I have done 28 days, yet I don't have the same experiences that you guys do,
Are they supplementing with ayahuasca or LSD or something?
No,
or what? I mean,
it's just their
thing.
Their channel, yeah. Like
their
literally,
channel.
people who are
That's
like,
channel.
I speak to angels regularly.
That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, I thought it'd be neat, but yet they were. Why could I do this thing and not think it was that big of a deal?
Yeah,
and I came out and was like, yeah, that was an extraordinary experience, but I have no context for how many people would then say that's something I can't even contemplate. I couldn't even imagine spending 4 hours in there, let alone a month by myself.
You're sitting across the table with someone who can. Like 4 hours? Okay, maybe.
Yeah. But I can't contemplate why you can't do that. Right? It's like probably asking John again, like, well, I can't contemplate playing in the NFL. But he can't imagine it, like, why it's a big deal. He just did it.
Yeah.
It's just who he was.
Right.
So she said, just, I met you and kind of got this feeling that whatever came up for you, you'd handle. And that you'd be okay in there. And she said I was also the only person that did any length of time without asking for a human to come in and speak with them. Mm-hmm. So oftentimes people will get to day 2 and they'll freak out. And they'll ask for someone to come sit with them or hold their hand or talk to them or something. And I went the entire month. Just at one point, the halfway point, they came in and sat with me for about 2 minutes.
And I mean, this is, again, emphasis, complete pitch darkness. Your food was sent to you through like a double slotted spot in the wall.
Like a mailbox.
A mailbox?
Yeah, like one side's open, food comes in, that side's closed. And people always ask, oh, when did your eyes adjust? Your eyes never adjust, ever. So it's pitch black all day, all night, period.
You had a toilet, a small shower, and a cot, basically.
Yeah, and a little piece of foam.
So that's again, kind of the theme of transition, going from light to dark.
Yeah.
That's a big transition. What was your biggest fear going into that hut?
That I would lose my mind.
That's a reasonable fear.
Literally that I would go crazy and not come out okay.
Now, did you have a way that you could like hit the panic button and they'd get you out of there?
I had a key on my side.
Okay.
So I could leave at any point.
How are you going to find the keyhole?
By feel.
Okay.
Everything is by feel. Like key was in the slot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And every day I would touch it. So you have to touch everything to get around.
To get a sense of
like where you are in the room without bumping into stuff. So I could pull myself out.
So biggest fear going in was that you were going to lose your mind.
Yeah.
Coming out of it, maybe there's a whole. Maybe the answer is this is what your TED Talk's about. But what was the biggest lesson you learned coming out of it?
There's so many. Having to deal with myself. So what would happen about a week? I went through about a week of just normal routine and kind of boredom. I was like, oh, this sucks. There's nothing to do in here but meditate, and that's it. And sort of run through a normal, like, how would you get through a week? It's like sitting on a long flight. Mm-hmm. I'd do gratitude exercises. I'd list shit I wanted to write when I came out. And then on day 8 or day 9, I fell apart emotionally and just had all of this stuff from my past come up and family history come up and past relationships come up. And so I was literally having physical arguments with people in the room and yelling at people, and as if they were, as I can see you right now, they were that real. And then what do you do with that afterwards? So if you've imagine sitting here having a real argument with your wife for 4 hours, and then she disappears and you're in a dark room and you can't text your buddy and be like, God, my wife was just driving me fucking crazy. You can't do anything. You just have to sit there. And to do that day after day after day of, okay, I'm on the floor bawling my eyes out for 7 hours, then what do? You can't call someone or reach out to someone and be like, hey, I just need you to listen to this, or I need a hug. I need nothing. You get nothing. So just having to deal with myself while going through trauma or reliving trauma, dealing with my divorce, dealing with my ex in my head, dealing with what's going to happen when I come out of here and have to go back to real life. So that's the I got you, like having to literally every day, like whatever happens today, it's okay. And whatever this leads to, it's okay. I'm going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Like constant talking. That was a biggie. And this is so hard to articulate, but the last week in there, I felt this is what death is. Like the world is going on around me. I am now completely removed. People can't contact. It's as if I'm dead. No one's talking to me. No one's touching me. My life is now irrelevant because I hypothesized that, holy shit, the world didn't stop and wait for the next 7 days.
Imagine that. Right?
Imagine. This is what it's like. I am that insignificant to the world. And swallowing that and going through a really hard time with it, of like lying on the floor all day and being depressed and not eating, and sort of, I was in there maybe a week too long, health wise and mental health wise. But thank God, because I had to just sit there and go, yeah, at some point you're not going to be here and the world's going to go on. So deal with that, accept it. It's that incredible dichotomy of my life is completely irrelevant and I am irrelevant to the world. And as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to fucking change the place in every capacity I can by teaching everything I've learned this year. So it was this sort of odd mix of again, accepting that we're all not going to be here for too long. Mm-hmm. That's okay. I could be gone, driving out of here today, get hit by a car.
Right.
And that means that you got to use the time that you got.
So it sounds like it was maybe that realization was freeing, or you found freedom in it.
So freeing. Yeah. I'm irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Therefore now I'm free to do anything.
Yeah.
Like none of this means shit anyway. So get out and do whatever it is you want to do, go do it.
Yeah.
Because none of it matters. And everything that's external doesn't matter. Nothing matters out there. Yeah. How you deal with, there was no external life in that room other than food. And the food wasn't that good. It was vegan, which we can go off for like another, you have like another 45-minute segment. It was vegan. Yeah. It was death, Nothing external mattered or existed. Mm-hmm. But yet my inner life in that room was so real. And I talked to you. I did interviews. I wrote my entire TED Talk in there. Mm-hmm. I performed it multiple times to a live audience, had conversations with people that, this is going to sound so fluffy, I swear to God they were in that room with me.
I was going to ask, were you having like these hallucinations that were like very visual and vivid?
The visual aspect wasn't that real, mm-hmm. but the answers to like questions I had, or like if you and I have a conversation, mm-hmm. and you leave me with something like, man, that conversation changed my life. That happened multiple times, but the person wasn't. There was no human in there with me.
You weren't like, well, I guess hallucinating.
No,
to the point. Yeah.
No, and I thought I would.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like watching a TV screen. And we can get into ayahuasca if you want, because I did that a couple times after, and that's literally like living in a different world. Mm-hmm. This was like close your eyes, have a conversation with someone, and walk away dumbfounded at how much insight and knowledge they just gave you. And then
but at the same time, acknowledging they're not in the same room with you.
Acknowledging that you are the only one in there.
It's just an
energy. If you want to dive down the wormhole of like, are they really there? Are their spirit there? Whatever you want to do with it, you can. Mm-hmm. Or just say, no, it was a complete fabrication. And I made the whole shit up. Mm-hmm. But either way, the answers were the answers.
So do you think, which one was it?
Both. I would say that it actually was a different realm that you enter when you get to that point. Mm-hmm. And on that realm, you can communicate with people in a way that you and I can't right now. Yeah. And I know I sound like a fruitcake saying that, but especially to your audience. But that's, once it happens a couple times, so much of this year, especially Guatemala, was... fruitcakeness stops being fruitcakeness once you've experienced it like for the 6th time.
Yeah.
You're like, oh wow, maybe there is something else going on here that's beyond the physical.
So what do you think it is about that experience, or having those experiences, which maybe shifts your perspective to, again, maybe there's something there. Mm-hmm. Is it that you're playing with the microphone again?
Sorry.
What is it that other people are tuned out, or not, maybe not tuned out, but again, this kind of goes back to the book I was just reading, Way of a Peaceful Warrior, where the premise of this book, have you read this?
Yes.
Okay, so the premise of this book, for people who haven't read it, is that there's this guy, the author, Dan Millman, who is a student at Berkeley, Cal Berkeley.
The gymnast,
he's a gymnast, and he comes to school, he comes to college, and he's a top-level gymnast, but is having some internal issues that he's not quite sure what. He's just kind of an insomniac, and he stumbles into a gas station one night where he meets a person who becomes his teacher and mentor that he calls Socrates. And the book is about their relationship and then the journey to becoming a peaceful warrior, which I gotta say, I love the idea of the book. I didn't love the writing.
Okay. There's a movie on it too.
There is a movie on it. But as he transitions through the book and his, again, I'll use the term awakening, his awakening into the teachings of his mentor is much about how he's got the ability to live a blissful, complete life once he tunes into it, but that most people insist on going through life tuned out.
Yeah.
And staying focused on the external things that we tend to stay focused on.
Yeah. I will agree with that statement.
Yeah?
Yeah, completely.
And what during your time in the darkness, I mean, I guess you just answered it with the idea that you've made these connections, but is it an idea that there is a shared source of energy, a shared source of consciousness? I know I'm sounding like a fruitcake to my audience now,
let's
too.
Just go. We'll just go full
But I'm
hippie
intrigued by these ideas because, again, going back to the death real quick, you see how death is impermanence, right? And itself is not a long. I mean, death itself, the actual act of dying, takes seconds or a millisecond, even, right? That transition from one to the other. And then something occurs after that.
Yeah.
Whether I don't, and I'm not a religious person, so I don't have beliefs towards like a heaven or hell kind of divide.
Yeah, me either.
But even if there is nothing at all, there is a transition that happens after death, which is then becomes, the decomposition of the body back into, well, theoretically, the earth, right? That is a transition itself. And then that transition of your body into the soil, and then, it sounds corny, but the flowers or the trees or things that grow out of the nutrients is a transition. So is it a shared energy, shared consciousness, a shared something I'm missing? Do you know? Can you give us the answers to the universe?
I don't know what it's shared. I think the best way to look at it, or how I've looked at it, is it's, like there's a radio. How many of us have used an old radio? There's information moving, and there is, like you have your radio station, but if you're not tuned into it, or if there's so much other noise in your life, which most people, that is their lives, is just constant noise. The beauty of having my whole life ripped out from under me was that the external distractions started to go away. I'm no longer married. I no longer have a business. I no longer have an apartment. I'm not worried about making money. Those are huge pieces. Those are mountains, right?
Massive.
Mountains gone.
People spend entire lives on one of those.
On one. Yeah. Gone. Then you take away your vision. Then you take away other people. Then you take away having to make your own food. Then you take away furniture. Then you get down to the bare bones in the darkness, and all of that noise goes away. And all that you're left with then is the noise in your own head, which we all battle with too. How many times you get and you're just arguing with people in your head or whatever it may be. Your own noise, let's call it. And if you can get that to start to go away, that's when I think you just hear shit. And I don't know how else to put it but that's, I think, if we had a stereo booming in here, but yet we're trying to listen to a little radio that's constantly on in the corner, you got to get the stereo turned down before you can even acknowledge that the radio exists. So having that quiet, it happened multiple times this year at my most quiet. So even in the last experience when I was in the woods, being alone for multiple days in just the woods, I had incredible, I said, like my meditations, I don't hear anything or see anything. It was like being back on drugs, or being back on ayahuasca, or back on a hallucinogen. The meditations were that vivid and that insightful, and to hear voices as clear as I'm hearing yours, and then look around the woods and be like, who the fuck said that? And maybe, did I make them up? I don't know. But either way, I heard them. So I think there is information out there that some people are attuned to, some people aren't. And just like, if you can't hear it, you won't believe that I didn't believe that other people could until I started hearing stuff and being like, well, who said that? Okay. Well, if they hear that all the time, maybe they're just more attuned to it and they're just different than I am. But then hearing it 4 or 5 times or experiencing it 4 or 5 times and 6 times and 7 times, you go, okay, I'm not making the same shit up over and over and over. There is something else out there.
Do you think it's, it seems to me that, and this just isn't a fully thought out idea, but dropping your ego seems to be a big part of being able to connect to that.
Huge part. Huge. You know, ask every cop, I would imagine, at some point you guys have had an intuition. Don't open that door. Don't go in there. Call for backup. Don't take a right here, take a left. That's at a vulnerable moment. You're not going, well, F that, I know what I'm doing. You hear it, right? That's not any different than sitting in a meditation for 4 hours and walking away with a tiny piece of something whispered in your ear. So it is the times when your agenda gets pushed to the side or your agenda doesn't exist, because I guarantee you intuition and whatever guidance you want to call it spiritual guidance, call it heavenly guidance. It's going to go directly counter to what you want to do. It's not your agenda. Usually your agenda is getting right in the way of it. So it is dropping that ego, right? Because I can't, if all I'm doing is listening to me, how can I hear anybody else?
Sure. That goes for a lot of different things too.
Yeah.
All right. So transition or continuing, you left Guatemala, and then when you got back to the States, you did something that, this is actually something that sounds awesome to me and sounds like something I wouldn't do the dark retreat. That scares the daylight out of me. No pun intended. But you went out on a wilderness, is it retreat, expedition?
No, it's a course. So a 28-day field course with Boulder Outdoor Survival School.
And this is not a like military how to infiltrate the Soviet Union kind of outdoor survival course, but more of a how to live off the land and survive on your own. Yeah. And again, 28 days, another 28 days of this. So
kind of interesting that the two were...
You spent 28 days in darkness. You moved to 28 days out where you are now susceptible to the wilderness and all. What did you... So this is in Utah?
Yeah, southern Utah, Boulder, Utah.
Okay, so you show up for this course. What are you allowed to bring with you?
So the first, they ask us not to give all specifics. So the first week-ish is called impact. And they want to simulate, like, okay, your plane's crashed. You're now in a survival situation. Your car is wrecked. You're lost hiking. What do you have with you that, one, we can't kill you, or else that's shitty for, like...
Bad for marketing.
It's bad for marketing. So what's the minimum we can have you have that will keep you alive but is still realistic? So we had a knife, 2 water bottles, water drop, like chlorination drops so that you could have hydration at all times, a first aid kit, a cup to drink out of, and a 5x5 sheet to wrap all that stuff in to make sort of a loose bag, and the clothes on your back, which included long underwear, pants, boots, long underwear top, wool sweater, wool shirt, and a beanie.
So not even a backpack, just stuff that fit into this sheet and the clothes you could carry.
Yeah, you wrap the sheet like a burrito and then slung it over your shoulder and tied it. And the sheet then also turned into your like blanket for the night.
No tent.
No tent, no sleeping bag, no light gear, no fire producing gear, and it was fucking cold. Like freezing cold, as in there's snow some days, there was hail, we got rained on. I have numb toes still. Like it was brutal. Still. Yeah, not good. Yeah, it was freezing. Yeah. And that the first week, that's all you did. No food. So for the first week, there's no food either. So you're just figuring this stuff out as you go for the first week. Not a lot of guidance even. You know, their theory is that you make the mistakes and then we'll teach you why after. So our very first night, there's 14 of us or 11 of us. We take a van ride a half an hour into the woods. They drop us off. The instructors make us, spend a little bit of time with ourselves, looking at the sky, and then we start hiking. And we hike for about 2 hours in the dark, and they say, okay, suddenly it's stop here. We're bedding down for the night. See you guys in the morning. And you're kind of looking around going, what do we do? And that's it. You lie on the ground and figure it out. And then in the dark. And the next morning,
without headlamps or lights,
nothing.
Or any of that, yeah.
The next morning they come and go, hey, how many of you froze? And we all were like convulsively shivering. People are crying. It's brutal. And then they take us up to where they slept, the 3 instructors, and say, oh, if you notice, we made like a bed out of pine needles, and then dumped pine needles on top of us, and that kept us nice and toasty warm. So tomorrow night, go do that. And that was kind of how the process went. Yeah, the first week is unbelievable. You know, I've never been colder in my life. Yeah, literally, or hungrier.
So again, transition from civilian or civilization. By this point, you'd been out of the dark hut for a while.
Yeah, for a couple months.
You were back to your, Western civilization capabilities, I should say. So transitioning from that into the wilderness now, what was your biggest fear going into the wilderness?
It's a lack of control.
Okay.
And they purposefully, and this is a really interesting thing to play with, we were not allowed to have any future knowledge, if that makes sense. So you'd ask, like, hey, how far are we hiking today? I'd say, well, we'll stop when we stop. When are we getting food? We'll eat when we eat. What time is it? We have no idea. So you're just on someone else's deal the entire time. Yeah. And to watch your brain then go, hey, when does someone quit? Oh, we had people, did someone quit on day 5 in the last course? Like all these sort of roundabout ways to get, did they quit on day 5 because they didn't get food till day 6 is really what you're asking, is when the F are we going to eat? Yeah. It's a fascinating concept, but really just being completely out of control and knowing how much discomfort was coming and how little I could do about it. So I'm freezing, literally shaking and convulsing, snuggling with 2 grown men to try to keep warm. And it's 8 p.m. and it's going to get significantly colder throughout the night, and there's nothing you can do about it. Mm-hmm. That sucked. But then that was also the greatest teacher. But going in, that was what I was worried about.
Why didn't you quit?
There was no way. I told myself, same with the dark, like, I'm just not quitting. I don't care what happens out here.
But what is that? I mean, that's easy to say, and maybe it's just easy to say, but there's been a lifetime of experience up to it. But there's plenty of people who said, oh, I'm not going to quit, and then they quit.
Yeah, we had guys quit on the course, and they said someone quits on every course.
Do you think it's just this decision you made? Because it's not a flippant decision to say I'm not going to quit. I mean, there has to be some real commitment to be able to struggle with that, either whether it's the darkness or the cold.
Yeah, and hunger.
And hunger.
Yeah.
Yeah. How much weight did you lose?
I lost 26 pounds in a month, from 182 to 156.
Maybe I just need to go walk in the woods for a little bit.
I'm telling you, we would joke that we're going to start our own course. Be like, hey, give me $5,000. Okay, go in your backyard. Okay, don't eat for a week. Yeah. What do? I'm going to spray you with the hose for a little while.
But it's something we hear oftentimes with like people who talk about buds for the SEALs, or the guys we've had on who are SEALs or Green Berets. It's just a not gonna quit. But like, what switch flips in your head that I mean, did it ever? You never considered it?
Never. I knew I would not quit because I'd made the decision with so much resolve. I think walking in, just to say, whatever comes at me, I'm going to handle. And it's going to be miserable. But then you start to break down, and this was a real help, and I'll preface this with a story that happened earlier in the year. But you're miserable now. That's not going to be forever, right? At some point, the sun is going to come up. It's 8 p.m. All I have to do is make it till 6:30 in the morning. Okay, that's 10 and a half hours. That's 10 and a half hours of nows. I'm miserable now. I'm still miserable now. I'm still miserable now. But at some point, that's going to end. So it's not a dissociation, or it's a different relationship with the present moment. And I think what gets people to quit is diving into that, like, it's never going to end, or the future. That's fear of what is this? What happens if my toes never come back? Or what happens if I can't stand up tomorrow because I'm so tired? No, deal with now. I'm just cold now. I can deal with being cold. I'm just hungry now. So taking it, I think, chunking it down a little bit. And the story I was going to say, earlier in the year, I did a workshop with Traver Boehm, who's a teacher on masculine feminine issues. And one of her coaches put us in a squat. So we just had to sit in this deep squat and hold it, not like ass to floor where you relax, but hold. This whole group of guys is doing this for multiple minutes, and people start shaking. Like your legs are going crazy. Right. And then they stood us up, go back to the squat, arms out to the side. So now you've got two things that you're dealing with where your brain's like, get me the F out of here. And the guy asked, this was the question that I carried into the woods. How would your relationship to right now change and the misery that you're going through, the experience that you're going through, if you knew this was forever? So there was no past. There was no time when you weren't in this squat. And there is no time when I'm going to let you out. This is your now reality for the rest of your life. And it changed because suddenly you weren't obsessed and addicted to this moment that you knew was coming in the future when you could stand up. Right? So it stopped me from going, I'm just going to live in my head in that moment when I'm warm. I'm just going to deal with the misery of right now. And that made it bearable. So that was how I did it minute by minute. But the decision, I don't know, you just kind of made the decision. Like, I'm not leaving. I'm not quitting. I'm not fucking quitting ever. And when the guy did quit, he was part of, so a guy quit on day 14 and he was part of like the three guys I was hanging out with and like building shelters with and kind of close with. And the other guy and I just came right together and said, there's no fucking way we're quitting. Like, I will not let you quit. Do not let me quit. No matter what I say, we're not quitting. And we both just looked at each other and said, die out here. You know, it's not going to happen. But
right.
Like, we were willing to go to the point where shit got uncomfortable.
And then how many people are on this trip? And then you had some time alone too in this, right?
Yeah, there were 11 of us, 7 men, 4 women. 2 people dropped, 1 quit, 1 blew his knee out, just an old knee injury, and it flared up. We did 5 days on our own of a solo period.
And is that where you have to hike from point A to point B, or you're just you're static?
You're static for that point. Yeah, they just want you staying put.
Given the time and, this was September?
Yeah, September through October. Late September through late October.
So with the experiences you'd had up to that point, the darkness, that had to probably prep you pretty well for being alone for 5 days.
No problem.
Yeah?
Not a problem at all. It was lovely. It was actually wonderful.
It's a beautiful area of the country.
Beautiful area, and your life is so simple. Like, what do I have to do today? I have to get up. I have to figure out what about my shelter was uncomfortable last night, and can I change that? So I'm going to get more pine needles. I'm going to put a different cover on top of me, etc. I've got to get firewood. I've got to try to get some food or deal with food situation and water and my mind. And that's it.
And again, seems like a situation where there's no ego issue. You don't have to worry about how nice you look.
No, dude, we were a mess. We looked, it's funny, on the last day we hiked back out. Yeah. And ended up like near a public parking lot, and would see people hiking in. So we're crossing them on the path. And you talk about like 11 feral people where we've all lost a ton of weight. We have blood on us. We've got dirt on our faces, just staring at these doughy, white, heavy backpacked humans of like, I'm going to eat you. If no one was here.
An episode of The Walking Dead.
Yeah, it's literally like Lord of the Flies. Like, we would ask, like, do you guys have food? And people like scurry away from us.
So you're not an outdoorsy guy, right? In that sense of like, hiking and camping and wilderness survival stuff, that's not necessarily your thing.
No, I enjoy it.
You're a surfer and you're in the ocean and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But
I have camping gear, but I've got a tent and a sleeping bag and et cetera. But no, I was not a wilderness person per se.
So what did you learn coming out of that experience?
Yeah.
It's only been a month or so, but what has been the lesson learned so far out of that?
Twofold. The first is how little you need to be okay. And that, again, was a central theme throughout the year. That if your inner life is complete and rich and happy, then you don't need shit. Like, had no entertainment out there. It's just nature. Food, water, shelter, and another human, and even maybe them only half time, I'm good. So just a reminder of cultivate the inner and the external doesn't really exist anyway. That was first. Second was a reverence for life and for nature. On the second week, we had to kill a lamb and eat it for the entire week. And we drew straws to who would kill it, and I drew the straw. So I had to kill this thing with a knife, which I've never killed an animal that close. And it was a phenomenal experience of trauma and reality of, oh, this is where meat comes from. This is fucking gnarly to kill this thing and watch it like flop around in front of me and hold it down and see it bleed out and cough out and then skin it and cook it and eat it for the week. But just the visceralness of it and the realness of it really changed how I view, one, the food that we get, and two, just the cycle of natural life. Mm-hmm. That was the second thing. And I think everyone should work with people who are dying. I think everyone should have to kill their own food with a knife or their bare hands at some point. And it would change how we eat and how we view waste and our view of what is sacred. Mm-hmm. That every single breath is sacred. Because when you eat, you kill something. Something gives its life for you. Mm-hmm. That's pretty profound if you sit and think about it.
Yeah.
And let it settle into your core. Then again, everything else, it's perfect that we're in a reconstruction of your home, because then that stuff is so irrelevant. You know, when you've gotten down to the basics of, I'm kneeling over a live animal, I'm about to jab a knife through its throat. I don't give a shit what color my paint is. How many, like 60 shades of white.
You might not care what color white is.
Yeah, just a reverence, man, and a connection to basics. The instructors were these incredible guys and would say, we're not teaching you how to live in the woods. We're reminding you of what it was like to do this for thousands of years until we stop doing it. So this is your natural state. And what you're doing is unnatural when you come at it, when you leave here and go sit in a car and get on a cell phone and then go sit in an office for 10 hours and then sit on your couch for another 3 hours and spend your weekends drinking beer, watching football. That's unnatural. But we view it as natural. But we're going to put you in this situation where you are reminded of your natural state, and watching what that did to the group as far as people, all of us walked in there with baggage. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm walking in with not knowing if my favorite patient's going to be dead when I get out, if my divorce papers are finally going to be done when I get out, of a whole bunch of other shit I walked in there with. And everybody else the same. People who had death in the family and were going through major transitions. And how at the end of that month, all of us had so much peace, despite having gone through physical hell, but how calm we were and how joyful we could find hilarity in such simple things. Mm-hmm. It was just a wonderful reminder that, again, everything on the outside is irrelevant. And everything on the inside is so much more profound, but we've got it switched in standard Western living.
So, coming out of the woods, mm-hmm. were you excited? Maybe excited is not even the right word. Were you happy to be back amongst modern day living, or were you disappointed?
I felt like I wasn't a part of it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
It was a really odd first month back where I felt, and this may not make sense, that I was floating above everybody else, and I had a secret that I knew that nobody else knew, and that I'd go to Whole Foods and look around at people and be like, that's irrelevant. Don't worry about that shit. Mm-hmm. There's so much more important stuff going on inside of you. Mm-hmm. Than what you're worried about. And, you know, see people getting in an argument and be like, this doesn't mean anything. Especially coming out to our political landscape.
Yeah.
Like, this is irrelevant. Why aren't you worried about what's going on inside of you? You're so effing pissed about Trump? Go spend 2 days in the woods. It's not going to matter. So it wasn't disappointing. I was overwhelmed with gratitude for seconds at a meal.
You sent me a very funny photo of your shopping cart. Was that like hours after you'd gotten back into a city? And it was like...
Yeah, $260 at Whole Foods. And I had ribs and apple pie and root beer and like everything you can think of.
Yeah.
But a bed.
Yeah.
You know, it was so cold that I had to sleep in the fetal position every night with my blanket wrapped tight around me. Mm-hmm. And then my right hip and right shoulder would go numb. or get in excruciating pain, but I have to just lie there and deal with the pain because moving meant being cold. And one of the decisions I made was warmth trumps pain. So if I'm warm and I'm in pain, I'll lie there in pain all night, as opposed to being cold again because the cold was so miserable. So it wasn't disappointing. It was kind of like I only put one foot in, if that makes sense, and left one foot in the woods and didn't fall back into society. It's really hard to articulate, but I didn't care about the stuff that I was walking into. I think Trump had just made his I grabbed the pussy comment, and it was like that was happening on a different planet than I lived on. And still to this day, I'm not really concerned about it. It's like, yeah, that the presidential election doesn't affect me. If it gets to a point where I need to, I'll just walk back in the woods.
Because now you know you can.
Because now I know I can. And I know I'm not only comfortable there, but that's reality. This isn't reality. This is bullshit. It's nonsense. It's drama. It's literally the egoic drama playing out in politics. How many people are furious today over that election? Furious. Their whole lives are just consumed with anger and social media hatred. It's irrelevant. It is literally irrelevant. If you go somewhere where all that matters is the inner landscape and you find out, you have like conscious contact that's real. Like, oh, this is all that really matters. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It totally makes sense. There's a difference between understanding, not accepting. I accept it. That's not what I'm saying. I guess that sounds great.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a difference of understanding it and experiencing
it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's such a unique feeling, Garrett. I don't know how to articulate. How do you explain sex? How do you explain being a master at jiu-jitsu? How do you explain a clean and jerk to someone who has no conscious contact with it? It was this feeling of peace but yet separateness, of like almost looking at a distant island where all this crazy shit was happening and being like, thank God I don't live there, even though this is where I live. But it's a weird sort of transition. The transition never fully happened, thankfully.
So, give me a little self-review from where you started to now. Like, how different are you?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Or are you just the same and it reinforced how you've always been?
I think the way I view the world is 180 degrees different.
In what sense?
In that the way I look at the human experience, I was coming off of so much loss, supposed loss, and now I realize that I didn't lose anything because none of it was real anyway. It was just, and it wasn't an illusion. I had a marriage, I had a wife, I had a kid on the way, I had a job, I had a business, I had friends, but it wasn't real. It was just it was like a story playing out, but it wasn't me at my core. It wasn't, God, I'm fumbling this.
Those are possessions in some ways.
Yeah, it was.
So you had possessions stacked up.
I had like actions, but they weren't real. They weren't me.
Okay.
I think I can look at situations. I can look at how people interact. I can actually look at the world and view it from a different standpoint, where before I couldn't even view it because I was in it. So it's kind of like this year has given me the ability to step backwards and see things from a distance and then watch and go, oh, this is just that playing out. This is just that playing out. It's not reality. If you can step back and stop everything and then look at it almost like a screen, be in the world but not of it. That makes sense?
Yeah, detached.
Yeah, just a detachment from it that's given me a really unique view on it, and a view of both how I was plugged into it fully and the challenges I had in it because of how I was plugged into it, and then the clarity, the overwhelming clarity in my stomach of thinking this is what the human experience really should be. I've seen death. I've been with people who are dying. I've done my own spiritual death or emotional death in the darkness. I've sat alone in the woods and contemplated everything you can contemplate and meditated to the deepest level. it's just a different perspective. I think that's the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the same because my perspective is different.
Sure.
But yet, I still like surfing and girls and meditation and lifting weights.
Still human. I mean.
Yeah, I'm still human. I think before, the best way to put it is before I had both feet in the physical human experience, and now I've got one foot in the physical human experience and one foot in the inner experience. And an outer, or a God, it's so hard to articulate. And a spiritual experience, Like, I'm not a monk. I'm not going to go live in an ashram and disappear and just meditate 24 hours a day. And I'm not going to live my life as if that world doesn't exist. So it's one and one.
Mm-hmm.
There's a foot in each door or in each house.
So if, people are, what would be your recommendation, or what would be the path you would show people who can't, for whatever reason, go do 28 days in the wilderness or in the darkness, or do those things, but they are maybe seeking some of that detachment? Where do they start?
They start with meditation. It sounds so cliche, but you start by looking at how you stack your time. So from the moment that alarm goes off to the moment you become unconscious at the end of the day, you are unconscious because you're just doing with no thought or introspection, or it's so busy. If your whole life is spent in reaction, then you have no time for contemplation. So you have to create that time with, even if it's 5 minutes of just quiet, of silence, of no phone. I know people who have kids are going to be like, this guy's full of shit. But even 2 minutes, even 30 seconds, right? Mm-hmm. It's like what you just asked was, how does someone who couldn't live in water for a month experience water? I'll say, first you dip your toe in it. That's how. And then you go, oh, that's what water feels like. Then you've touched it. Mm-hmm. Then you get to decide, I want to stick my whole foot in it. Then you decide, I want to become a swimmer. Then you decide, I want to live underwater. Then you decide, I'm going to spend half my time in the water, half my time on land. So meditation is dipping your toe in the water, because it is the step back from the ego. It is the step back from reactivity. And it is the start of everything that's inside of you that's going to keep you from experiencing peace, for lack of a better term. That shit's going to come out. So it's like you almost have to go through a series of fights with yourself, because your ego is going to be like, you're not going to meditate. Because that's my death, right? That's right. Like, I want to run your life. I want you to make more money. I want you to be with more attractive people. I want you to have a higher job. I want you to be the king shit around the house. Everything that's on the inside says, it doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter who you're married to or who you're with. All that matters is your relationship to the present moment. That's what your inner voice wants you to do. Your outer voice is like, fuck the present moment. We got to go buy a Porsche. Right. So those two have to have their battles. And you have to, that's meditation. Or journaling. It's introspection. Yeah. Go spend some time in the woods. Go spend some time. Just get quiet. None of this happens until you get quiet.
So you've done guided meditation for us before. Yeah. In episode 27, we've talked about meditation before quite a bit and those kinds of things. But specific to my audience, or this audience, to me, and first responders, it's a big question, so I'm trying to parse it down, but why?
Because it's real. Yeah. Because nothing else is real but the water. Mm-hmm. So once you've dipped the tiniest bit of your toe in that silence, and you have that, like, everybody who's meditated for any period of time will tell you, I had a 1/1000th of a second of peace, where I was like, oh, everything's okay. Mm-hmm. This is fucking weird. But that moment, then it's like you've experienced water. Then you can never not go, no, I don't know what it's like to put my toe in the water. Right. And that you begin to then build on, and then it's 2/100ths of a whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. That's peace.
Mm-hmm.
And then it gets to a point where there's a precipice where you go, I will never live without that peace, or I can't. Just like fitness. Like, I can't not go to the gym. You're that type of person. Where suddenly the inner has become so rich and real, and you start to see that the outer is so illusory and bullshitty. It's Trump versus Hillary. It's not real. But you have this understanding at the deepest level that, this is reality. This is real, not reality.
Right.
And then that's why. Because it's just like, I don't know how else to say it. It's real.
Well, I had that experience the other day, actually, where I haven't meditated in a while, and I was able to the other day. And I set it for 7 minutes, hoping to get to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And it flew, actually. I was surprised when the timer went off. And was encouraged by that, because it obviously meant that I had detached to the point where I had stopped looking at the clock, or not looking at the clock, but thinking about the clock, or thinking about other things, and I'd gotten some significant moments of pause.
Right.
But this is a rough time to be in law enforcement right now. And
yeah.
As we're recording this, 11 officers have been killed in the last 13 days, all by violent assault. Right.
I'm so sorry.
So it's, and that stuff starts to weigh on you. I think it's natural. And even me, I'm not someone, I don't watch the news. I try to avoid even the cop websites on my days off and that sort of stuff. But I was at this party at this elementary school here in town. Throws this huge Alice in Wonderland party every year, just like a fun thing for kids from the neighborhood to go do. It's crazy how intense this thing is. Anyway, they're doing this, and as we're there, I'm waiting for my kids as they're doing some art. So I turn on my phone and I go to Instagram, and I see right there that an hour before that, a deputy here in California had been shot and killed.
Okay.
Right. And instantly changed my mood.
Of course.
And I didn't connect with it at the time, why I was so pissy.
Yeah.
After the fact, I brought that tension into my body and into my shoulders. And of course, after a little bit, they came out my mouth.
Right. And then I killed somebody.
Right. And then I was being very, curt, and I wasn't being present anymore. And in hindsight, it took me in hindsight. I just thought I was annoyed because the kids were taking a while to get their stuff together, and they wanted ice cream before lunch. And my son was like wanting a rabbit, and what was insane. And I wanted to get out of there because I'm surrounded by 400 kids. Maybe it was why I was, but anyway, I was no longer present, and I was now into something that obviously affects me, but didn't affect me personally.
Right.
But more and more, it's hard to see those things, read those things as they happen more and more, without having some sort of a visceral physical reaction. Mm-hmm. And I have found that meditation, journaling, just breathing even, as in focusing on the breath, not that autonomic response, but those things help create space again between a horrific event and my reaction to it, or in my interpretation of it.
Right.
And the more I do that consistently, the more I am at peace with the possibility, but also with the fact that that's the world that I walk in.
Right.
So I think that to me is how, someone listening to this who might be like, why would I, some hard ass SWAT cop in big city America, need to meditate? It's like, well, you may not need to, but
you do need to.
If you have any desire to not be consumed by this job, I think the best thing to do, before all the advice of keep your non-cop friends and all that sort of stuff, is get right with your own mind and your own place in all of this.
Right.
And much like you're saying too, it's like, the work we do matters, most certainly.
Absolutely.
But it matters in this realm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Not anywhere else.
Nowhere else.
And likewise, the work I do at work isn't the work I do with my kids.
Right.
And I have to do those both well.
Right.
And it's hard to do both. It's hard to go to work in a job where I got this the other day. Someone someone was saying like, well, Caltrans workers or highway workers, like they're killed at a higher rate than law enforcement, and nobody's screaming or complaining or holding rallies for all the highway workers that get killed. And I said, well, a highway worker doesn't go to work with the possibility that someone's going to feloniously assassinate them, right, or assault them in death. So what's unique to us is that that's a very real possibility, right? I mean, there's plenty of other people who have much riskier jobs, but short of the military, there is nobody else out there who goes to work with a very real possibility that they could be the subject of murder, the victim of a murder, right? On purpose, right. So people get run over by cars, people get electrocuted up on the high pole, that happens. Right. But they don't go to work with their head on a swivel wondering that if someone's going to finally take a shot at that target on their back.
Right.
And
that's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah. I don't have that.
That can weigh. That can weigh on a person sometimes. And that there needs to be some acceptance of that, and that in that reality. Mm-hmm. And then that's one of the things that I found helpful. Reading also books like this, and focusing on gratitude. Gratitude's been big,
huge.
Because if you're grateful and understanding of if you have a really good concept of gratitude, a couple things happen. I think one is you're grateful for your ability to cause an impact in this world. Mm-hmm. Like the job sucks at times. I'm on mandatory overtime and I'm exhausted, but I have a unique opportunity to participate in this sort of interaction that we all are experiencing in a positive way. I see it as a positive way. Yeah, directly. Right. But also it gives me perspective to come home and be grateful that though my daughter is throwing a fit and stomping around the house, that I have a healthy daughter who's stomping around the house.
Right.
That I have these gifts of abundance.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have had I definitely would not have had that same perspective on my family and my life without this job.
Yeah.
For sure.
I bet.
This is like, to me, law enforcement, we talked about things we've learned or I've learned. Death, the relationship with death has been a big one, but just that relationship to everything else, to my ability to affect my own outcomes, right? And we talk about like how the last 6 months have been a little rough, but you see all of the people who've chosen to abdicate all responsibility in their lives and look where they're at as a result. And you see the ways in which people make excuses for themselves, the ways that they have allowed addictions to take over their lives, the way that they have allowed illness to take over their lives, or a caustic relationship, or any of those things that they very much have chosen. That they've chosen that path as much as I think you've chosen a path of fitness and mental health and mental wellness, I guess. Does that make sense? Like, there are people out there who have decided that their life is supposed to be miserable and they're supposed to be an addict, and that there is no coming back from that. And that's been their decision. And being able to see that all the different perspectives and or just the lifestyles, I guess, and seeing how people live on the opposite side, right? Like, oh, I don't want to do that. And then seeing people on the other side who, like, I'm sure people listening to this are listening to you talk and thinking, okay, wow, he's energies and all that. And
yeah. And I had to go through that whole process.
Right.
Like, I'm a fruitcake now.
Right.
Or I don't want to talk this way.
Yeah.
How do I couch this in Western tough male language? And then just said, don't do it.
Just be honest
about it the way it's your experience of it. And it will resonate with people who it resonates with, and it won't. And it's still, you know what? I'm going to go I'm going to go deadlift, try to get 400 pounds up on a bar.
There you go.
And so I'm going to honor both worlds, as just in the same way of going, wow, I have these realizations and I see the world in this different way. I'm not going to quit deadlifting. So it's the honor of both. And I think that coming together of the both worlds is the most powerful way to do it, the most powerful way to live. So just like you said, I'm going to meditate for 5 minutes. You still be a badass SWAT cop, But unless you address the other side, your life is incomplete. And anytime there's an incompletion, there'll be, I think, illness, and there's also going to be unhappiness and lack of satisfaction.
Yeah.
You can't just live in one world, or I can't. So yeah, it's going to be out there for some people. It's out there for me. I'm still not 100% comfortable talking about all the answers to your questions.
Well, it's a good thing we're not putting this out in public or anything like that.
No, it's all good, man.
So, so I asked you a question via
Sure.
text. I wasn't going to talk about this necessarily, but you talk about living in both worlds, and I guess worlds being like what, Western, Eastern, or physical, spiritual?
Physical, spiritual,
Okay.
or physical, non-physical.
So I'd asked you a question via text because we
Yeah.
were chatting one day, and I had this thought on my mind, and I was looking at like, okay, how do I? I was trying to figure out where I was and where I wanted to go in terms of some like personal goals, but also like how do I start to get back on track with fitness and that sort of thing. And at first, I journaled out, okay, well, I'm going to tackle one thing at a time. And I'm going to spend the first week trying to get my nutrition in order, and then the second week trying to do this, and the third week trying to be back in the gym 3 times a week, and then the fourth week, adding cardio, whatever it was. And then I started in on that plan, and then I thought, well, maybe I'm going about this wrong because these are all physical issues. These are all physical aspects of the job. So physical aspects of fitness and trying to get right. So I texted you like, do you think? How did I phrase it? Do you think that? I should probably look up the text. Like I said, I wasn't expecting to think of it. Basically, it was saying, which comes first? Which ones maybe more plays a role in your fitness? Is it your need to get your physicality in line and moving, or is it getting your mental energy aligned and moving? And I meant that in the sense of I initially thought, well, I need to get my nutrition and my meal planning and my exercise routine down, and then I'll work on sleep, and then I'll work on meditation and clearing my mind and getting motivated, I guess. Getting motivated, getting disciplined.
Right.
I'm thinking now that, and I asked the question in a sense of the body never does anything the mind won't allow it to, right? My body can only do things that my mind tells it to. And I don't mean my monkey mind, but I guess I mean my brain, like moving my fingers or running my mouth. Those sorts of things are things my mind is allowing my body to do, right? My body can't just go take off on a full sprint right now with my mind telling it to go do that, without my mind telling me to go do that. Make sense? So, and in comparison this to like law enforcement, my body can't draw its firearm without my brain telling me that it needs to draw its firearm. And then my body goes through the different machinations of getting my firearm out of the holster, right? Or I can't go search and clear a building without my mind telling my body how to do it. So I began to think, well, I need to spend more time focused on the mental aspects of getting, quote unquote, in shape. And I can't take my body, if I want to lose 50 pounds or whatever it is, I can't lose 50 pounds if my mind's not right. And that might seem cliche, or maybe it's already been a beaten dead horse on other podcasts or whatnot, but I could exercise all day long, but if my mind isn't bringing my body in the right direction, then I'm not going anywhere. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, you're getting there.
So I have to get my mind right.
Yeah.
But I mean, how do you do that is a bigger issue, I guess. But that seems to be more and more common to me, or a bigger lesson is that if talk about energy again. Yeah. If I'm a ball of negative energy, right, bad day, or I'm not being present, right, I'm pent up in that way. My body's not going to allow me to go. My body can't go to the places I want it to go because my mind is held back and pent up with these other issues or this other negative energy, for lack of a better term. But on days of openness or gratitude, of a feeling of abundance, then my body can go where it needs to go because my mind's allowing it to go there.
But I also what's underneath your mind, because your mind's a lot like a body. You can train it,
Right.
you can trick it.
Well, I guess that's what I mean.
Where's the inspiration?
Yeah.
And that's I think the question that you're grappling with is,
right.
Why aren't you inspired? Because you just ripped your effing house apart, which is not a normal thing to do.
And just we touched on it earlier, but yeah, I'm remodeling our house.
Yeah, we're looking around. There's no rugs.
That's why you mentioned stuff like paint on the walls,
Yeah.
and there's nothing here because there's no we tore our floors out, so we're down to subfloor.
Yeah.
All the walls are sanded and primed, ready for paint.
Yep.
All the trim is out.
Yep.
New doors have gone in.
Yeah.
And I'm doing all this myself.
All yourself.
That's right. I'm setting that up for people because we've talked about it a few times about how barren the house is right now.
So let's look at that as an example. How much money are you going to make for doing this?
0.
Okay. How much free time are you going to get given to you because you did it?
Yeah, none. I'm losing time.
Right. So there's no real payoff for this, but yet you were inspired to do it. You could not do it, right?
Right. Because my wife said so. Actually, that's not true at all. That's not actually. I just had to take a pot shot, but that's not true at all. Actually, I totally ruined the moment too, didn't I?
It's all good. Something underneath is driving it, and that's where I think you got to get in touch with people who are struggling with fitness, people who are struggling with nutrition. You can set up every game in the book.
Yeah.
You can set up a calendar. There's a million apps. There's a million deals. Unless you're inspired to do it, you won't do it. And once you're inspired to do it, none of that shit will get in your way. Just like this. This is ludicrous. It's insanity to rip your house apart.
Yeah.
Yet you did it, and you did it willingly. And you did it despite the costs. So I don't know the procedure or protocol or whatever it may be to get inspired. But until you have that, none of the games and tricks and diets and gimmicks are going to work. The best workout program in the world isn't going to work. But if something inside of you says, I have to fucking move today, you'll stop right now and bang out 100 push-ups, right?
Yeah.
So finding that, how we do that, I don't know. But developing that or looking into yourself and saying, why aren't I inspired to? Why do I have all of these goals? Are they mine? Why do I have all of these tools and tricks and knowledge and whatnot, but yet it's still not happening? That's your real question.
Yeah, that's what I'm struggling with.
Below mental. It's not mental, because mentally you know what to do, right? Give me 5 things that you could do right now to increase your strength and lose weight. And you know you could, okay, I could stop drinking, I could get more sleep, I could blah, blah, blah. I could rearrange my life, I could not rip my house apart, etc. But yet what's underneath it? But yet then we'll look at something like the house or even this podcast. Why are you doing this? How much... what year is the Porsche in the driveway that you have strictly from the podcast? It doesn't exist.
Right.
You're not making money on this.
No.
It's taking your time. Yet you can't not do it, right? You can't not fucking do this thing. So then ask, what is that about it? Is it what's coming up through you that's making this a reality? And what isn't coming up through you that's making your fitness a reality? That's kind of the unanswerable question until you get down to it. I went all of last year or 2 years or the last couple of years like not being able to do jiu-jitsu consistently. I would tell myself like 3 times a week I'd put my gi out on the table. I would like hire a private coach, yada yada. I just didn't want to do it for whatever reason. And it wasn't until I got in the woods and sat there and meditated and heard it's time to do jiu-jitsu again. And the next week I was in Santa Fe wrestling with people after years of sort of like, God, why isn't it? Why isn't it? I think there's certain windows that open and close, and it's just okay for you to say, yeah, fitness isn't my number one priority right now, even though mentally I keep making it my number one priority, and I keep telling myself it's my number one priority. It's almost just surrendering to the fact that I got a house I got to deal with. I got a wife. I got kids. I got a podcast. I've got a job. I've got et cetera. I'm not going to be in the best shape of my life. I know this is shitty coaching advice from a fitness coach, but if you're swimming uphill for years, ask yourself, am I okay just with how I am now? And then even maybe taking that step back and giving yourself the grace of saying, I'm not going to be in the best shape of my life while I have 2 kids under 10, a wife, a remodel, a law enforcement career, a podcast, 3 other projects on the side. It's okay. And then maybe just giving yourself that permission will let some of the inspiration come through. You know?
Yeah. I think you're not the first person to tell me that too, or something similar to that.
Yeah, like, give it. It's
to
okay.
Point out what's going on and to point out all these things and just be like, it's okay. You have to learn to be okay with it. Otherwise, you're going to beat yourself up constantly.
Yeah. And there are people who, if you look at the Jockos and the Camachos of the world, something else, they don't have something. They're not driven to do something that you are. And they may, again, we go back to the writing and fitness. It's something that you, like this podcast, you are inspired to do it. They are inspired to work out. And just the same way that you are giving up your free time to do this week after week after week after week for a year, they're inspired to work out at 4:30 in the morning or whatever it may be. They can't not do that. And so looking at what you can't not do and be okay that, there'll be a time that you may wake up in a year from now or when the kids are in high school and go, it's time. I'm getting back to fucking training hard every day. There's nothing standing in my way. And it's a confluence of external factors falling away, that they take care of themselves, they're driving, whatever it may be, and whatever the timing is for you, that now's the time. It's time to get back to it. And it's such a shitty word, but surrender to it. You go, okay, I'm just going to give myself that break and go, you know what? I'm going to be a little bit heavy while I'm a cop. I'm going to do my best, but I'm going to accept the fact that these are the chips I have to work with right now, as opposed to creating mental games that tell me I have different chips or different cards, but I don't. And then getting frustrated and then letting that wormhole be gone down. So just acceptance of, I'm doing the best I can right now. It's great. Tomorrow I can do 1% better, but looking at 100% better and then getting disappointed that I didn't do 100% better month after month after year is just going to make for misery.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So back to you.
Sure.
Where are you off to next?
I head to Esalen in a week. I go up to Big Sur to do a month-long work study, and it's a leadership program for the last month. Yeah. Volunteering, and I kind of volunteering because it's work study, but just getting to spend some time up there and kind of dial in everything that I've taken from the year and packaging it in a way as if you're still listening, there's a challenge for me to articulate some of the things that I've experienced, but how do I take these incredible lessons and package them in a way that I can actually speak about them rationally, or speak about them in a way that moves people and inspire people to live very differently than they have.
And in the interim, where can people go to find out more about you?
I post a lot on Instagram. I'm really liking that platform. So at Traver Boehm, TraverBoehm. My website, I do a weekly blog. Unless I'm traveling, I decided to not pre-write 5 of them and drive myself crazy. Just accept the fact that a couple weeks there's going to be the same post, but same spelling, traverboehm.com. And in the new year, I'll be doing a lot as well of doing live workshops and traveling around the country and getting groups of people together to teach meditation and ask this question. On Friday, I'm doing a class here in Santa Barbara based around what would you do? Let's ask this question. What would you change if this was your last year? And even if you don't have the ability to travel, or you have kids, you got a full-time job, how do you then take it from the external, which is, I want to go to Paris, and put it on the internal? I want to be happier. I want to have more peace in my life. I want to find more quality and richness and joy. And let's work on that. And then go deadlift.
And then,
yeah,
it's good stuff. We didn't even touch on your TEDx talk, which I'll post in the show.
Please do.
Links. You got back here in August for that, and that's phenomenal.
Thank you.
And it should be it should be a mandatory watch, just like everything else.
Thank you.
It's amazing, and it's about your time in the darkness.
Yeah, and the whole year,
figuratively and literally.
Yeah, kind of a mix of everything I've gone through, and then how do you use shitty experiences to your benefit, which every cop is gonna.
Yeah.
Every human.
Yeah.
Part of the human experience is misery.
Yeah.
And pain.
Traver, thanks for coming back on, man.
Thanks, brother.
Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.